Well, hello and welcome, and let me say happy AU Day to all Africans and indeed the whole world at large. Since humanity began and civilization began in Africa, you should have a part to do with AU Day. And on a day like this, I've been in this garden before, but when I came here to celebrate a diplomat extraordinaire, a man who's lived his life all on the corridors of diplomacy and indeed has lived an exemplary life. However, today I'm not here to shower praises on him. I'm here to pick his thoughts on this wonderful day, its significance, and if indeed it's necessary. And I'm here to talk to the one and only Victor Beho. And for the purposes of this interview, I won't call him Ambassador Victor, he's Uncle Victor, because I see him as an uncle figure, father figure. So Uncle Victor, you're welcome.
Thank you very much.
And happy AU Day to you.
Thank you, and I wish you the same.
Uncle Victor, Monday today has been declared a holiday. Now, my first instinct before we even go into AU Day is that I would have rather leadership gave an inspiring speech in the morning, motivate us, bring that Pan-African sentiment in us, and drive us back to work, rather than hold the economy down and say we are celebrating AU Day. That's my thoughts. I don't know what yours is.
Well, thank you very much. First of all, let me also take this opportunity to join you in wishing all our viewers a happy anniversary. Yeah. This is a very important anniversary for this country and for Africa generally, because we are celebrating Africa's achievement, and we've come a long way since independence, and it is something that we ought to do. As you quite rightly said, perhaps we should have marked it a little more than we are doing at the moment. But in life, you just do what you have money for. And since we are not in the best of economic conditions at the moment, this modest way of marking it would be acceptable.
Now, my argument is that since we don't have the money, should we have taken this day as a holiday, or should we have gotten a speech from maybe the vice president, the president, somebody high in authority, tell us the significance, the need to go out there and buy Ghana or buy something African and go to work, rather than put the economy on hold. Or
Thank you very much. I think that whether or not we should celebrate is out of the question, because it is a AU mandated date. The holiday was decided upon by the African Union, and we are all enjoined to celebrate it as a continental day. So government doesn't have much of a choice in that. But how we mark it, as you quite rightly said, is important also. And we will see how this goes on as the years roll by.
The AU itself, and the reason why I'm saying that, the AU itself doesn't seem to have any bite. There isn't an African country that goes into trouble and the AU is there to say, yep, we are here to help you. Indeed, in my books, all the leaders who seem to toe Pan-Africanism line are deemed as terrorists or outcasts, and are not even liked by the AU. And there they saying, yeah, declare a holiday, don't go to work, shut your central bank, put the economy on hold, and the next day you can carry on. I mean, that's not fair.
Well, it was a decision taken together by member states of the AU a few years back. But it's not quite correct to say that AU is not there. AU has been quite active in seeking resolution of some of the conflicts in certain parts of the continent. And also, an organization is worth the determination of the sum of its membership. If the members want AU to be more effective than it is, they should get more involved. I agree with you that AU has been a little tardy in responding to the situations that we have had. But it is also true to say that managing a group of 54 countries is not easy to hold consultations and to determine which way to be going when there is a crisis.
Now, OAU was formed in 1963. In 2001, we changed to AU. I mean, 50 years. And we always say, the proverbial line is, oh, I know we are not where we are supposed to be. I know we are not where we are supposed to be. Is there ever going to be a time where we will be where we are supposed to be? Or this is going to be the tagline that, oh, we are not where we are supposed to be?
Nana, as an optimist, I will say yes, there will be a time. And, you know, 50 years is a long time in the lives of individual human beings. But 50 years is nothing in the life of a nation. And 50 years after the American independence, they were nowhere near where they are today. In fact, most countries, France, for example, after the revolution, 50 years after the revolution, was still having difficulties as well. So ours will come. The other thing is that we must remember is that the wherewithal with which Africa could have developed faster than this was all taken away from us in terms of resources, in terms of human resources. The best, the strongest of our young people were shipped into slavery for over 300 years.
Uncle Victor, you said something very significant, and that's all the civilized countries now. If we look at 50 years from their struggle, we may even be ahead of them. But is the danger not that 50 years after their struggle, they did not open up that free, everybody can vote, anybody can sell anything, anybody can import anything, you know, everybody can come in to compete. I mean, 50 years, they still had some protection until they were firmly on the ground before they opened up. And even that, I don't think they've opened up as much as we have.
Well, you are right in saying that they had greater resilience to some of the drawbacks that we face today. But I think that we should remember that Africa also is now building institutions that will protect it from the ravages of growth. And we are doing as best as we can. We will get there sometime, but at the moment, the international economy is so structured that we are at the weaker end of the stick. We ourselves have taken a long time in developing human resource. 50 years ago, you could count the human resource competent to develop this country on your fingers. Today, I am proud to notice that there are many younger generation, people like you, Nana, and others, who are knowledgeable, who have been to some of the best institutions available to mankind, let me put it that way, and who are beginning to make a difference in the growth of this country. And that is where my optimism comes from.
My pessimism comes from the fact that in the days when there weren't so much PhD and all these knowledgeable people, I mean, you had the likes of Nkrumah rallying up people, and you go all the way down south of Africa, and there was a sense of pride and achievement that they wanted. We seem to have become more educated, but more very selfish as we go along, and that's my danger. That yes, we're building a lot of resource, but we're becoming very, very selfish. Me, myself, and I.
That is true. But first of all, we must remember that one of the things that made Nkrumah stand head and shoulders above everybody in contemporary Africa was the fact that he had very good education by the standards of the last century. He also was witness to the Great Depression that ravaged the economies of Western countries, especially the United States, and its deleterious effect on the black population. These are some of the things that fired his imagination. But then we must also remember that eventually Kwame Nkrumah's efforts came to grief, largely because the people on his continent failed to rise to protect him and to carry his message immediately forward. This is how it ended for him and for Africa, because we could have gone on faster with development if Kwame Nkrumah had not come to that sudden end. But it is also true to say that when he was overthrown, the streets of Accra was full of celebrants, people who were celebrating his overthrow and so on. So those are historical facts. But already history has judged Kwame Nkrumah to be one of the towering figures of our times, and nothing can change that.
Uncle, is the danger not there that if Nkrumah came today, we might kick him out again because we don't like to toe the line?
Yes, there is that danger, largely because we are still influenced from outside our continent, from outside our governments, by powerful neighbors, powerful friends, and so on, and those who hold the economic purse strings. Now it is something that we have to overcome in order to develop. There are too many influences from outside. Take, for example, in the whole of West Africa, we have the mining sector, the extractive sector, largely controlled by outsiders. All our countries have granted incredible advantages to these extractive industries. They have tax holidays and so on. They have failed to do anything for the communities where they are digging gold and iron ore and so on. And we've allowed them to go free like that. They will continue to take advantage unless we learn to negotiate a little more efficiently with them. I heard somebody say the other day that our agreements have been consistently bad with the developed countries, and that a bad agreement is worse than no agreement. So we should stop signing those agreements and make sure that things are in our favor. If you take the health sector, take malaria, for example, which is #1 killer in Africa today. Every year, malaria kills more people than all the civil war deaths in Africa since independence. 1 year, And yet, what are we doing? We have relegated this to Ministry of Health, and, the rest of government just votes money and that is not worried. Now, those who succeeded in eradicating malaria, even in tropical countries, certain parts of the United States, in Cuba, and so on, there's no more malaria because they went on the primary responsibility of going around and disinfecting pools of water. In other words, killing larvae before they could transform into mosquitoes. This is what they call vector control. And today there are medicines. But you will find as you go through our countries that those companies that supply drugs and treated mosquitoes and so on are encouraging individual politicians and civil servants not to go the vector control way because it doesn't work, which is a lie. And so we can buy some more from them.
Because we spend close to $1 billion on malaria subsidies.
Precisely.
Dollars, close
Now,
to $1 million.
That can eradicate malaria. This government, the Ghana government, did an experiment with the participation of the Cuban government a few years ago. And around the castle, the community there is one of the highest infected malaria areas in the country.
I see.
And yet in 1 year, they were able to reduce the infection rate by about 45% in 1 year only. Now, if only we had continued. But of course, they said that, oh, this is so expensive, we cannot do it, and so on. And we continue to sell medicine to Ghanaians who are dying like flies.
You mentioned negotiations. One thing you realize with Africa is, and now our new friends are the Chinese. Now the Chinese negotiate with every country individually. I was thinking if we could have a central negotiation board at the AU, so that if you wanted to mine gold, you come there. So it doesn't matter where the gold is, this is the price and these are the formalities. Because it looks like if you came to my village in Edumasa and I said, no, you're not going to mine here until you give me A, B, C, D. They just go to the next town and the next chief might say, oh yeah, of course, just give me a couple of change and start mining. And so it makes our negotiations very weak because we're individual. Could it be done?
Nana, you sound like an Nkrumahist to me. I believe this is the message that Nkrumah wanted to give the whole of Africa when he said that we should have a continental union government, one center of making policy that the whole of Africa could, that we should have a joint foreign service that will train our diplomats and so on. But of course, he failed in that because the various countries were too new in independence to want to relinquish their own importance and control of their respective countries. But instead, we've formed the AU. Gradually, the AU is achieving that, and it is taking a decision for the entire continent. And there are parliaments, that is the highest body, the heads of state meeting. What happened last week in this country, you know, some of them, and the decisions are binding, you know. So we are getting there. It's not going to come in the form of one country immediately, but if we can do things together, if we can train people together, if we can put our policies on behalf of everybody and adhere to it, and if we can develop resistance against deleterious influences from outside.
I'm going to take a break here, and then when I come back, I just want to find out. We have knowledgeable people like Victor spewing out all this wisdom, but what is it that stops us to at least just start one at a time? Stay tuned, we're coming. Well, you know, I know you are relaxing at home this beautiful AU day, whatever it is our AU day, and whatever we have of it, we have to celebrate it, and we just have to find out how we can just start one at a time. I know there's so many visions, there's so many aims and plans of the AU, but at least start one at a time, and that's I think that's what that's where my pessimism comes from. That even if we can just take two and say, look, in the next 3 years we will achieve this two, open the borders or something, you know, but we seem to have all that in a pot and none of them seem to be coming out of the pot.
Well, Nana, you're right in a way, but looking at it from outside, outside the common governance system, it looks that way. But actually, there are priorities. For example, we spent the 50 years giving priority to peace and security on the continent. Because unless you have peace, unless you are within secure boundaries, you cannot develop. And so we spent a lot of time, resources, energy in trying to achieve peace. And perhaps this is the decade in which there's been less trouble on the continent of Africa generally. We have not eradicated all troubles, but we are on top of most of it.
Simmering now.
That's right. You know, and so that was the priority in the first 50 years, and also building infrastructure. Every country was called upon to do so, and we have done so to various degrees. But after 50 years now, we are entering into second gear, so to speak, and building of infrastructure on a continental basis. And I'm going back to a question you asked me earlier on as to the role that ECOWAS, not ECOWAS, AU could play in, you know, negotiating and decision making. That is true. That has already started. Not only AU, but the regional organizations like ECOWAS, like ECAS for Central Africa, like the Southern Africa organization or so on. Those are the building blocks at the moment, and a lot is being done by them. For example,
before you move on, is that not even a danger for AU to have an ECOWAS, to have the Northern Bloc, to have the Eastern Bloc? Is that not a danger for the whole unit itself? Because then you may be fighting against each other. If we are AU, we are AU. Why then do you go and become ECOWAS and these guys become this?
Because our continent is so vast that it will be over bureaucratic if you have to do it all from one central position. But there are meetings on a regular basis where the regional organization compare notes and take decisions together as to how to go. ECOWAS, for example, in trying to build infrastructure, have been very active in negotiating with the Chinese on behalf of all the countries. Part of our Eastern Corridor Road falls into the negotiations that ECOWAS has done for the whole of West Africa, you know. And also the Chinese, for example, they like dealing with individuals, but they are also interested in mega projects. You know, Chinese will not come to build one bridge, you know, that sort of thing. But they want a dam, you know, something, a road that will link one country with the other, railway systems and things like that. And those ECOWAS has been asking, helping the West African states to develop. Similar organizations in other parts of it are doing the same now. And the result is that you will find that the last 2 decades have been the most productive decades for Africa. Our economies have fared better. We have brought down inflation, and you know, we have provided generally a better standard of living for our people.
Victor, let me pick you on 2 things with economy being better and people living a better life. Now, even though our numbers have been very, very good, you tend to realize that most of the sectors that record the good numbers are the sectors that the countries themselves don't own. And those living a better life were those who were already rich, and therefore the gap between the rich and the poor is widening. And so there are few people who've earned so much money, but they divide it amongst everybody and say, well, the GDP is high. But in reality, there's too many people hungry.
It is true that there are too many people hungry. In fact, we should reach a point where there will be no body going to bed at night hungry, you know. But that is difficult to achieve. What is also true in the scenario that you have given is that since independence, a huge middle class has emerged in Africa. Take this country, for example. You know, it has more than quintupled, you know, in number. And these have found it, because of the advantages of education and so on, to move to the upper sector of the middle class, leaving those who still do not have access to education in the poor areas. That is a challenge, and we should do something about it. Unless we put more money in education, unless we improve healthcare in the rural areas, unless our children go to school and achieve excellence, the poor will continue to grow poorer. What is happening now is sadly in step with what is happening globally. Globally also, the middle sector is growing bigger and bigger at the disadvantage of the poor. And resources are petering out. But we are witnessing also a paradigm shift in the economy of the entire world and of the continent of Africa. For example, resources are disappearing fast. Look at our water resources and water resources in other parts of the continent and the world. Look at, for example, minerals. Africa is the only continent with significant amount of resources, mineral resources in the world today. Well, if we give another century, we will come to the same level as the others. Where do we go from there? This is why research should be the biggest part of the effort now, as to what do we replace the monies that we have earned from the extractive sector. What do we do with those monies, and how do we make sure that we bring something good to our people?
My suggestion is we use it to education.
Precisely. Precisely.
So when the resources are gone, at least we can think.
And beef up research and development. You know, it is something that is seriously missing in the structure of education in this country and in Africa generally. We are spending a lot of money, rightly so, on primary education and so on. But it should be in tandem with research and development, you know, which are the most rewarding areas in which we should put money in order to bring wealth to this country. These are the things we should be looking at. The science can give us a lot of answer to our problems, and we should be a little more active in that area than we are doing at the present time.
Victor, should ECOWAS have like its Supreme Court, so that like the disagreement between Ghana and Ivory Coast as to, you know, the border is too far right, the border is too far left, we can then go to this ECOWAS Supreme Body and say, look, this is our case, you hear it for us. So, I mean, so we keep within ourselves, we respect each other, and we do things for our, rather than every time, oh, let's, you know, go to The Hague or let's go here. Should we have something like that?
You are quite right. As a former president of the ECOWAS Commission, I feel this is a sad commentary on the efficacy of ECOWAS if we should carry our disagreements to other bodies. But that is because other bodies are more active than we are. Yes, we have a legal organization. We have an organization that brings all the legal entities of ECOWAS together, based in Abuja, Nigeria. And its charter is crafted in such a manner that it can hold such arbitrations as you talk about. However, we still are influenced from outside, and so we tend to go outside. You will recall that in our current disagreement with Cote d'Ivoire, Ghana first took the whole thing lightly and said that, oh, between the two of us we can do, and adopted that conciliatory attitude towards Ivory Coast in the beginning. It was only after a couple of years when the Ivorians showed a determination to take over our oil wells that we decided to go to the international arbitration, the Law of the Sea Tribunal in Hamburg. And we have had a technical decision in our favor. But I agree with you. If we tasked the ECOWAS legal entity, they could also not only come out with a decision in accordance with international law, but they can also play a part in mediating between countries. They are at the moment not too heavily challenged by these things, and I have had discussions with individual members in Abuja and so on, and they feel able to do what you are talking about. Going to international court, you know, is also, you see the rest of Africa rebelling against that, because first of all, the negotiations were not transparent. The US, for example, gave the impression that it was in favor of an international court until the signing ceremony. Then it announced that it will never sign because its nationals cannot be held accountable under any foreign jurisdiction. But they expect us to take our people there. This is where the whole thing has failed and is failing. But we should replace it by an African tribunal, you know, made up of some of the most serious and reputable judges from our countries, representing not only countries but legal systems on the continent, and who will also have the diplomatic attributes of deciding things as to lessen conflict on our continent.
Borders, the imaginary borders which were bestowed upon us by people probably 5,000-6,000 miles away. Can we start at least maybe Ghana, Togo, just experiment? Look, for the next 6 months, we're not going to operate the border and see, you know, how bad things go, how good things go, and if it works, we carry on. And I mean, can we start like that? Let's 6 months from January to June. There's not going to be any border between Ghana and Togo. You just come in and go as you wish, and let's see if it improves the economy. If what happens, because we are so, you know, rigid about our borders.
I guess what you are saying is that the borders should be so managed as to allow free movement. Yes, this is also one of the targets, because the borders are fixed by constitutions. You know, the Ghana Constitution recognizes the geographical boundaries of the territory called Ghana. But we have the right to go into agreement with other, you know, sovereign countries as to the kind of relations that should exist between us. And what you are saying is what we are doing in AU and in ECOWAS. For example, one of the things that we have already started experimenting is joint border control. For some years now, we have been training our immigration officers, you know, from the same manual, so to speak. We have been training our custom officers, you know, from the same manual, so to speak. And as of now, we have even built a joint border post In Togo, for example, we have one at a place called Nwepe, where the border posts will now be manned by both Togolese and Ghanaian officers, you know, and it is becoming very popular already. First of all, most of the truck drivers prefer to go through that route because they make it shorter than going through Aflao, for example. When they're coming from Benin, about 30 kilometers before they arrive in Lome, they turn right, and this brings them to this border post, which is opposite Joje in Ghana. So once they cross, they have very good road, you know, to Sogakope and on to Accra. So, and it shows also that you cut down corruption where you have the officers of two countries working side by side.
If we are able to, let's say Ghana, Togo was able to join, some of the main things are cocoa, you know, probably petrol. There are a few major items which the price vary. If the two countries can agree and sell this commodity at the same price, so that whether I took it to Togo or brought it there, it was the same price, agreed on it, and opened the border, I think business would automatically increase, because you'll be driving, you cross the channel and you'll be driving and it says welcome to France, welcome to Netherlands, welcome to this. So unless you see that welcome, you don't even know you've entered somebody else's country. And
you are right, but that is not all the story. The main thing is that we need an attitudinal change. The businessman in Ghana is first of all thinking about the market in Europe. You know, if he makes a shirt, he will be happier to sell it in Europe if he could. You know, and if he has to import something, let's say the same shirt, he's not going to go to Benin to buy shirts there to come and sell here, unless of course they are shirts made in Europe. You know, so we have that attitude which we must rid ourselves of. You know, about half a century ago, I served as a young diplomat in India. The same mentality was there. People were importing refrigerators and air conditioners from Hong Kong when they had industries in India making those things. Today, the coin has dropped. The average Indian is sure that the quality of their products are the same, and so they have cut down in that. The result is that Indian economy is performing much better than 50 years ago. We ought to follow in the same.
I'm going to take a break here, and that's one thing which every country that made it, that's how they did. They patronized their own, and they've documented it. They haven't hidden it as a secret. What is stopping us from buying our own? And I said I'm the unofficial ambassador for Goil. Everybody buy from Goil because they keep the profits local. And anything Ghanaian, why not? I'm coming straight back. Well, thank you very much for staying, and welcome back to this very exciting conversation. Just before the break, we were looking at borders. Literally imaginary borders to begin with. Then we now legislate and recognize them. And not only do we recognize them physically as some lines on the land, but in our minds, we've literally divided. And therefore, you go to South Africa and they said, oh, he's not from here, burn him. That's not from here, kill him. He's not from here. But in theory, that's one people. We're all supposed to be Africans. The shameful matter is that they don't kill the whites. They kill the blacks because they've been told that they've crossed that imaginary line into their space. Those lines are, you know, really endemic. Because why should an African be so xenophobic and commit a barbaric attacks?
Well, let me make a little correction. The borders are not imaginary because they were settled at the Congress of Berlin in the late 1880s.
No, but I mean, okay, maybe imaginary is the wrong word, but they were not drawn by us.
That's right. That's right.
So part of Ghana is in Togo,
part of Togo is in Ghana. Imposed on Africa. Yes. And why can't we do without them. First of all, because we all have not reached the same level of development that will make us accept this easily. And right from the beginning, from the time of Nkrumah, leaders thought we should leave borders as they are now and work on unity. Because once you touch one now, the effect, the snowballing effect, will put Africa into a disagreeable era of quarrels and wars and so on over territory.
But the AU dream started before the EU dream. And indeed, even though I haven't read the document, a lawyer friend tells me that there are certain paragraphs in the EU charter which is literally lifted of what Nkrumah said, and they've applied it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. That is because the European Union countries had reached a certain level of development which allowed them to take certain decisions without fear of the unknown in the future. But here, unfortunately, not. You hit the nail in the head in your introduction to the question when you said that one cannot understand why we cannot do the same as others are doing, and look at the xenophobia that is resulting and so on. Some or the other, when countries have not reached a certain stage, they tend to be suspicious of everybody. We have gone through that before. You know, in the early 70s, we thought all our economic difficulties were due to other West Africans here, especially the Nigerians, and so we chased them out. It took a lot of years for us to realize that that was not, it was bad governance that had ended us in that position. Then, exactly a decade later, the Nigerians also did the same to us, thinking that it was the presence of the Ghanaians that it was only later that they discovered that this was not, again, bad governance. You know, today is the turn of South Africa. They are thinking that it is other Africans coming there that is not making work available to their people. Can any South African, unskilled South African, replace a doctor from Mozambique, for example? No. They cannot. So they will have to learn to. But at the moment, they are too emotional to accept that kind of reasoning. But we should hold the government of the ANC responsible. Because a similar thing happened in 2008. And since that time, the government has done little to educate their people, to let them understand that people coming into the country are rather assets than a nuisance. That there's a lot that they can learn from Ghanaian, Nigerian, Zairoa who come there, because they are coming with some skills, that their presence will make their governments take certain decisions that will inure to the benefit of the poor. I don't know whether you know South Africa,
no.
But in most part of South Africa, if you're riding a bicycle and your bicycle finishes, unless you take it to a white man's shop to be repaired, there are no side bicycle repair boys and so on, like as you have here, you know. And yet there's no reason why it shouldn't happen there also. But it will take a long time for them to understand. They think that others are coming to take work from them. And also, the ANC government has failed to point out to them that even in apartheid times, a lot of the labor in the mines, the gold mines of South Africa, were from neighboring countries. It wasn't only black South Africans, but a lot of people from Zimbabwe, from Zambia, from Mozambique and so on, went to work in apartheid South Africa and came back at the end of the year to see their wives and children for a short period, and then go back. So this tradition has always been there. The only way out of that tradition is for South Africa to hurry up with the training of its own skilled labor, you know, and that is not going to be by the route of killing foreigners and killing Africans at that. So the general population is guilty of xenophobia, but the government of South Africa must take the blame. It has not provided the leadership. If what we're hearing that the son of the president was also part of those participating in then it is a serious situation. And I'm sure that by now the South African government is beginning to review its own part in this unfortunate situation that they find themselves in.
Now, the AU has 14 mandates. Number one, to achieve greater unity and solidarity between the African countries and Africans, to defend the sovereignty, territory, integrity and independence of its member states, to accelerate the political, socio-economic integration of the continent, to promote and defend African common position on issues of interest to the continent and its peoples, to encourage international, and it goes on and on and on and on and on. Should we scrap it all and just do education, education, education?
No, life is not like that.
Because then once we are properly educated, you won't even tell us to do all these things. Because I think...
no, I hesitate to agree with you on that. There are many educated people who are just indolent and who do not want to be part of any politics or governance system.
Won't you say they are schooled rather than educated?
Well, it depends on what we call education, you know. But education generally means, in our part of the world, is giving the reality to reading and writing and basic numeracy and so on, which is very necessary if people must understand you. But I say no because about 30, 40 years ago, I was involved at the level of the United Nations in the fight against apartheid, for example, in South Africa. And we brought together, we were taking decisions together since Nkrumah's time as to what the attitude of Africa should be towards whitedom in South Africa. And we were successful. We agreed on certain resolutions, both at the General Assembly and the Security Council, and we agreed into implementation, even though some affected ourselves negatively. But eventually, we brought apartheid down, you know, and it has been successful. Now, we have also laid certain building blocks for economic development and integration, you know. We must keep on doing that for as long as
integration. The reason why I'm going back to sticking my guns on education. As soon as any African country is in trouble, and I'm talking trouble, Ebola, the coup in Mali, Gaddafi, it will have to take a Western country to intervene. We will all just sit and we just sit.
Well, again, that is not quite true. When I was recently president of the ECOWAS Commission, I took personal part and leadership in finding an answer to the problem in Niger, for example. You know, we didn't have any foreign intervention in Liberia, for example. It was mostly a homegrown African initiative. And there are a few examples like that, you know. Now, in Francophone West Africa, and I must separate Francophone West Africa from the general trend, is to say that they are very fond of bringing in France to do the fighting for them. And sometimes with good reason. For example, recently in Mali, when the Al-Shabaab and its equivalent on our continent started Boko Haram and so on. They were very active in northern Mali. And at the same time, the African Union did not have the requisite armed forces to be able to fight them. Humiliation would have resulted. And so it was a merciful intervention when France sent in its air force to assist, and that problem was solved in a short time.
But there are 53 countries in the AU. So where's our excuse to say that all these 53 countries, we won't be able to do anything unless one single country, France, donates an aircraft carrier, and the British donates troops before we go and help poor old Mali?
Yeah, you know, as I said at the beginning of this interview, human efforts also depend on the resources at your disposal. Most of us cannot buy 5 tanks a year for our militaries. Most of us cannot buy 5 aircrafts a year for our, because of the paucity of our economic reserves and so on. And so for some time now, we have been depending on it. But we are making progress. You notice that Nigeria hardly goes to any of them any longer. If you call for C-130 aircraft, the Nigerians have a few. If you call for jet fighters, they may be a little outmoded, but they have an air force that is effective, you know, which the rest of us are. When it comes to transportation, air transportation, Ghana has aircraft.
Bringing Nigeria in, I think Nigeria's handling of Boko Haram was very, very embarrassing to the black race, in
Yes.
my position.
Absolutely. And we also saw the result in the last election. That is because, first of all, Nigeria itself underestimated the strength of Boko Haram at the first. Secondly, the average Nigerian, not only the leadership, but the average Nigerian's attitude to the North is not a very healthy one. And so when this thing came out, they had well, it's a dog biting dog. Their own people are, so they left it at that. It was when the international community started shouting and saying, how can you allow this and so on, that they crammed themselves into action. But even then, they had failed to monitor and to understand the strength of Boko Haram, you know, and also that Boko Haram was operating through neighboring countries. And it wasn't until they brought in neighbors like the Chad, Cameroon, and Niger that Boko Haram is on the retreat at the moment.
Because it's I'm going to move to Kenya, but before I go to Kenya, it's quite, I find it strange that after Goodluck is now been voted out, you know, he's now on the full attack on Boko Haram. I think he should have done that, you know, well before.
Well, he couldn't have done that well before because he needed the participation of neighbors, and that took some time to negotiate. These things do happen, and unless the neighbors feel the threat to themselves, they're not going to respond positively in a short time. But if you remember, Boko Haram started kidnapping some of the leaders, including the
Vice President of Cameroon.
Yes,
Yeah, his wife,
and so on, and that you know, immediately puts them on an aggressive path and so on. Okay, that was bad luck of President Goodluck, Jonathan. And but the good news is that Nigeria is beginning to take leadership in this thing, and Boko Haram is on the retreat for now. We do not know what will happen because Boko Haram is just a tiny bit of the global crisis in Islam, you know, in which a few minority, an insignificant minority of people of the Muslim faith think that violence can help them achieve political power and economic power. Certainly they are not doing this in the name of Allah, you
No.
know, because Islam and most religions
very
are
peaceful.
compassionate.
Yeah.
They protect women and children. So what they are doing cannot be described in any way as religious, and we must see them as violent organizations.
Another unfortunate situation is Kenya, where a bunch of thugs attack people and they call for reinforcement. And unfortunately, the police had to escort, dispatch the aeroplane to go and bring his family from some holiday, and therefore they had to wait for the family to come back from holiday before they can board the plane and go there. Indeed, when they got there, they did action, but then it was too late. I mean, should leaders like that be called to the AU and say, look, you are tagging the whole continent bad? Because already people think Africa is as a country, and if you're going to be a part, you're disgracing everybody.
Yes, well, I can assure you, having sat in some of the meetings of our heads of state, both at continental level and at sub-regional level, there are moments when heads of state talk bluntly with one another. It doesn't come out in the media, but they do. I can afford to talk out of turn now. When the Ivorian situation happened, when they tried rigging the election in favor of Gbagbo, and Gbagbo refused to leave and so on, at a meeting that was held, the others pointed out to the then Ghanaian president that he was wrong, and that the procedures had not been observed properly, and that there was a group of the judiciary in Cote d'Ivoire who were trying to bend the constitution to suit the favor of Gbagbo and so on, and they spoke to it. Eventually, the Ghanaian head of state agreed to disagree with his neighbor, but it was a decision taken on majority basis, so he had to go with it. That did not come out in public, but there comes moments when heads speak freely to one another on these things.
I'm trying to find the silver bullet. I tried education and you said no. Could the culture of demanding accountability help?
Help?
The culture of demanding accountability, so that the average citizen demands accountability from leadership. That look, you need to account to her. Because at the moment, I mean, now it's an NDC government, so if I'm NDC, I'm a little bit silent. If it's an MPP government and I'm MPP, then I'm a little bit silent. So at every given time, there's only one half of the country who wants this so-called accountability, and then the other one is playing reminder, but in your time, if I don't know, if we had a unified accountability, could the continent move forward?
Thank you. For as long as we have cast the die on party politics, we will never get to that stage. Wow. We will have to get to it through civil society organizations. Civil society organizations should take the lead in demanding accountability without reference to party colors of those who are responsible. It's very difficult, but it is achievable. For example, if civil society should rise up and say that child bearing mortality is too high in this country, and that government should account for this. Why it has not put more money into it? Why is it that there are not enough people in the health system to break this down without mentioning any party and so on? It can be done. The outrage would be felt everywhere, But what is happening here is that there is an over-polarization of politics in this country at this moment. So you'll find that those who are parading as civil society are aligned to one or the other. This is why it is not working. But in other parts of Africa, civil society is working quite well.
Uncle Victor, thank you very much.
My
I wish
pleasure.
I had time to talk more, but I think it's been a really, really beautiful conversation. And if you're sat home this evening just chilling, this is a sort of thing that I think the AU dream was, formed, or the EU was the whole idea of AU was that we should come together, build a continent that was proud and could do things on its own. You know what? We can always start on each individual. Whatever you do, choose the Ghana option first, or choose the African option first before you look outside, and I'm sure gradually we'll get there. Folks, tomorrow we'll be back to do this all over again. Thanks for watching, and Uncle Victor, thank you so much.
Thank you very much. It's been a pleasure taking part in your.
Thank you.
And I wish our viewers happy anniversary once again. We will succeed, I know.
On that note, stay beautiful.